Well, a delay this afternoon for a key Senate vote on financial reform means that in about an hour, about a half an hour from now, legislators will vote on whether to end debate on the so-called Dodd bill. For more on what that bill means for Wall Street, we're joined by Scott Talbott. Scott is Senior Vice President for Government Affairs at the Financial Services Roundtable that legislates advocates for the financial industry. Scott, welcome back to Bloomberg News. Always good to have you on.
Nice to be here, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Scott, is this bill going to pass?
Yes, they will pass. I predict by the end of this week or the beginning of next week, we'll see a final vote in the Senate. Then they'll go to reconciliation with the House. I expect we'll have a new law sometime around the July 4th recess.
Anything about this delay this afternoon that concerns you?
Well, I think that what you're seeing here is that they're trying to vote on the non-germane amendments before they invoke cloture. Once cloture is invoked, any amendment that is non-germane is not eligible to be considered unless there's agreement by all the members of the Senate. So what you see is a lot of amendments trying to get done before cloture is invoked, and thus the delay. So we're worried about the bill getting worse in terms of more heavily regulation on the industry rather than getting better. And a lot of these amendments represent that.
Scott, I'm just curious about something. When you look at sort of the nuts and bolts of how Washington works, we heard our Peter Cook saying that the Democrats are in this closed-door meeting right now trying to negotiate when the cloture can happen, negotiate what's going to go into the bill. Is your organization's job largely done then at this point, or do you still have folks on Capitol Hill that are trying to weigh in on what the bill looks like?
This is 24/7. This is priorities 1, 2, and 3 for us. I mean, we're talking about strengthening the regulatory system for decades to come, and we got to make sure we get this right so that we ensure that the system is stronger and this can't happen again. But we also want to prevent against over-regulation and too much regulation that could stifle creativity and innovation in the free flow of capital and ideas.
Well, as you know, Christopher Dodd, who had proposed an amendment that would affect the derivatives legislation that Blanche Lincoln had proposed, he's no longer going to introduce that measure. So the derivatives legislation as it stands, I know your organization is not happy with it. Is there any chance at this point of negotiating, of changing it?
Well, I think there's a lot of people that are unhappy with Senator Lincoln's, the provision that's in Senator Lincoln's bill requiring divestiture of a swap desk by a depository institution. A lot of the regulators have weighed in against it. So we need to find a solution to ensure that we don't over-regulate. This is a more draconian approach that ignores the realities of the market and the need for derivatives and their effectiveness in the market. So we need to find a solution. That'll either come in a manager's amendment or as part of that conference that I mentioned earlier when we reconciled the Senate bill with the House bill.
Scott, the Maine Republican Senator Susan Collins, she released a statement today. She said that the process by and large has been fair and open. Would you agree with that assessment?
I would agree with that. We've seen a lot of amendments. We've dealt with a number of them. Most of them had a 50-vote threshold. There's been a lot of discourse and back and forth between the members, and I think it's been a very open process, yes.
Well, speaking of the process, as Julie just mentioned, she mentioned Blanche Lincoln's amendment. As you know, yesterday, she and her challenger in Arkansas, they're going to go to a runoff that's going to come in about a month from now. What does regulatory reform mean for Blanche Lincoln and for other lawmakers who are up for re-election?
Well, I think there's obviously an anti-bank sentiment out there, and we've seen a number of members, and I'm not saying Senator Lincoln is one of them, but we've seen a number of members demagogue the industry in an attempt to score political points. And that's a dangerous way to set policy. So we have to be careful against letting the politics overtake the economics and ensure these, yeah.
Scott, I would just say at the same time, there does seem to be a lot of popular anger out there that these congresspeople and senators are reacting to. I mean, how would you propose that they channel that then, if not into the regulatory reform bill?
No, the regulatory reform bill is exactly the right economics, and it can be the right politics. What I'm cautioning against is overreacting and using the politics to impose economic issues or make economic changes that will have negative effects on the industry and the economy as well as consumers in the future. So we want to be careful to not to overreact, and that's what we're worried about, where the politics completely overtakes the situation.
Do you think that there are some derivatives that there is not sort of an economic purpose for that perhaps should just be eliminated?
Well, I think that the short answer to your question, Julie, is no. That derivatives have a place in this market. They're a solid risk management tool, and when used properly, they help businesses manage the risk that they face every day. The key is not to impose a draconian restriction or a prohibition on them, but rather to strengthen the capital requirements or the liquidity around them to allow them to be used properly.
Right, but I guess what I'm asking is, I mean, all derivatives are not created equal. There are widely ranging different types of derivatives. Aren't there some for which there's really not a solid economic purpose? The kinds of derivatives, when you're talking about CDOs, for example, that largely there's not even a market for at this stage, where you might want to legislate them even out of existence, or at least more tightly regulate them.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with more tightly regulating those derivatives, the ones that you're speaking of, but there is an economic value to every trade. Businesses wouldn't engage in them simply if there wasn't. So the answer is not to outlaw them, but rather let's regulate them and make sure that the risk associated with that activity is properly managed so that we don't risk the system or the bank itself.
Scott, we have about 30 seconds left. I wanted to ask you about one of the main criticisms of this financial regulatory overhaul proposal, and it was echoed again by the Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. He said that it doesn't do anything to rein in Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. That has been a cause of concern for a lot of lawmakers on Capitol Hill. Should this legislation do anything to that end?
Well, Fannie and Freddie are crucial to our economy, but it's no doubt that changes need to be made, just like we need to modernize our regulatory system. Changes have to occur to Fannie and Freddie. However, it's a challenging issue and one that needs to be studied carefully. So I would rather wait and study it and get it done right than rush to judgment and do something quickly. It needs to get done, but we need to get it done right.
All right, challenging issue and also a political hot potato, given that the midterms are coming up in November. Scott Talbott, thank you so much. Always good to have you on. Thanks.